Minutes. We are getting everybody in. Good morning. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Good morning, everybody. We're going to give one more minute for a few more people to log into the Zoom space, and we will get started. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Lindsay, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry, technical difficulties. It gave everybody a few more minutes to get in. All right, well, let's try that again. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the American Rescue Plan Act Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools Program webinar, otherwise known as ARP-EANS. My name is Lindsay Tornatori. I am the Director of the Student Achievement and Support Division at the California Department of Education, and I am very pleased to be joined by some of my colleagues this morning. We have Carrie Lopes, who is the administrator of the Title I Policy, Program, and Support Office. Amanda Stone, also representing the Student Achievement and Support Division and supporting this webinar, and Joseph Sines from the Government Affairs Division. Before we get started, I'm going to pass it over to Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, Malia Vela, to give a welcome from our Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. State Superintendent Tony Thurman really welcomes the partnership and on making sure that all of our students here in California get the aid and assistance that they need. We know that there's been a tremendous amount of learning loss and difficulties during the pandemic. We're all trying to make the best of things, and we certainly know that assistance is needed. So we're very happy to continue our partnership and to work together to make sure that all of our students are served. And I will turn it back over to the team. If there's any questions, please follow up using the EANS inbox. And thank you again for attending today.
Thank you, Malia. All right, so a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, I want to just share this PowerPoint that we are sharing today will be posted online on our EANS webpage on the California Department of Education website. Please give us a few days to get that posted, probably next week. Also, we are recording this webinar, and we will you can have access to this recording by emailing our EANS mailbox, which is eans@cde.ca.gov. This email address is listed later in these slides. Also, we are here to give you an overview of the process for eligible non-public schools to apply for ARP-EANS funds. We are also here to answer your questions today. Please use the question and answer feature in Zoom to type in questions. All participants will be able to see one another's questions, and all participants will be able to see any typed answers that we are going to reply to. For any questions that we do not reply to during this webinar space, please know that we are going to download all of the Q&A. Our team is going to synthesize the questions. We're going to put together written responses, and we will email all of the participants on this webinar today, those responses by Monday. Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide and jump into the agenda. So the agenda of the topics that will be discussed today is we will give an introduction to the Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools program under the American Rescue Plan Act. We refer to this as ARP-EANS, also referred to as EANS-2, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Joe Sines is going to provide an overview of the ARP-EANS from the United States Department of Education requirements and guidance. We will then talk about the eligibility requirements for schools to be eligible for ARP-EANS funding. We will then walk through the application timeline for ARP-EANS funding for schools to follow. We will then talk about how to complete the ARP-EANS application to apply for funding. We will also share the funding methodology for ARP-EANS funding. And finally, we will share an update on the plans for how the Department of Education will be soliciting proposals for third-party vendors. This last bullet point does not apply for non-public schools and is not a requirement for non-public schools. We just are going to provide this as an information item later on. Can we please go to the next slide? So throughout this webinar, we will be using some acronyms, and I just wanted to take a moment and review them. So first is EANS, Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools. This is the federal program that is offering these emergency relief funds to eligible non-public schools. We have two types of EANS programs. EANS 1, or what we know as CARISA EANS, which is the Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools under the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. Please note that's why we are using acronyms. CARISA EANS is EANS 1, which is already in process. Today, we are here to talk about ARP-EANS, or the Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools under the American Rescue Plan Act, which we also know is being referred to as EANS-2. The focus of today's webinar is on EANS-2. Another commonly used acronym is NPS, which refers to all of you, the non-public private schools and eligible non-public schools who will be applying for these services and assistance under EANS funding. Final CDE, that is us, the California Department of Education. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. So a couple of big questions that have come up and we know are probably at top of mind. We want to address them right away before we go into the overview of ARP-EANS. So a question we have received from the field is, do I have to apply for EANS-2? So we have two scenarios. Scenario 1, you are a non-public school who is currently receiving services and assistance through EANS-1. Yes, you must apply for EANS-2. Due to the changes in eligibility criteria under ARP-EANS, no schools will be automatically rolled over into EANS-2. No application for EANS-2 means no funding for EANS-2. So please, I just want to be very clear. If you are currently receiving services and assistance through EANS-1 and you would like to apply also for EANS-2, you must go through this entire application process for EANS-2. All right, next slide, please. Can I apply for EANS-2? Second scenario, you are a non-public school who is not currently receiving services and assistance through EANS-1. Yes, you can apply. Non-public schools who meet the eligibility criteria for EANS-2 may apply for EANS-2. EANS-1 is not a prerequisite for EANS-2 eligibility. Please see the EANS-2, also as we know, ARP-EANS, request for application posted to the CDE website for full eligibility criteria. And we are going to walk through this eligibility criteria today during this webinar. Next slide, please. All right, so let's take one last overview slide for building background knowledge, which is the difference between EANS-1 versus EANS-2, or CARISA EANS and ARP-EANS. As you can see on this slide, the amount of money for local assistance to be distributed out to be given as services and assistance to eligible non-public schools is the same. It's the same amount, so we got another round of funding. For both programs, non-public schools must apply for each individual program. Again, no schools will be rolled over into EANS-2 from EANS-1. You must apply for EANS-2 fresh, and EANS 1 is not a prerequisite for EANS 2. Services for EANS 1, we had broken out services and assistance offered in 3 distinct categories. For EANS 2, there are there's just one category. All services and assistance will be provided by the CDE, and we will talk about our plans for how we will be delivering those services later on in this webinar. For EANS 1, there was an option for reimbursements for category 1 and 2 items through October of 2021. For EANS 2, there will be no reimbursements. All services and assistance, again, will be provided directly to the non-public schools. There will be no reimbursements for EANS 2. The funds for EANS 1 sunset on September 30th of 2023. The funds for EANS 2 sunset September 30th of 2024. And finally, for EANS, the eligibility criteria for schools under EANS 1 or Carissa EANS, we were able to include all schools that applied. 100% of the non-public schools who met the non-public school definition as per the federal guidelines who applied received EANS allotments. For EANS 2, the eligibility criteria has changed as per the U.S. Department of Education. And so the change is that in order for a non-public school to be eligible to receive EANS 2 funding, they must demonstrate that 20% of your total student enrollment are students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Similar to EANS 1, we will use 2019-2020 enrollment data. And again, we will go into more detail about this specific data point and how to show that 20% threshold in a moment. And right here, I just wanted to also thank the California Private Schools Organization, because we appreciate the support that you gave to us in order to get to a 20% threshold. California had to do a special application to do 20% because we believe and know that a 20% threshold would be more inclusive of more schools. And so thank you, CAPSO, for your support in that application process to United States Department of Education as we were successful. All right, please go to the next slide. All right, so now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, our federal program liaison, to Joseph Sines, to talk about the overview of the ARP EANS program.
Thank you, Lindsay. And we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so just a little bit of background on ARP EANS. As part of the American Rescue Plan, Congress set aside $2.75 billion of Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, specifically to provide emergency assistance to students and teachers in non-public school through the ARP EANS program. The purpose of the ARP EANS program is to provide services or assistance to a non-public school that enroll a significant percentage of students from low-income families and are most impacted by COVID-19. On September 9th, 2021, Governor Newsom applied for the ARP EANS award. California received an award of $181,312,003, and of which over $180 million may be allocated to eligible non-public schools. The CDE is the department that is responsible for administration of the ARP EANS program. Next slide, please. So as Lindsay alluded to a few slides ago, the ARP EANS Act extends the EANS program authorized under the Carissa Act, but there are 2 exceptions. State educational agency may only provide services or assistance to non-public schools that serve a significant percentage of students from low-income families and are most impacted by the COVID-19 emergency. So again, we're serving those at the 20% of students from low-income families, and we'll talk about the impact in a few slides. In SEA may not use ARP EANS funds to provide reimbursement. So again, as Lindsay said, this is a change from the Carissa Act version of EANS where reimbursements are allowed. Next slide, please. So following the approval of the ARP EANS application, all states were required to publish on its webpage the state's approved RFA. This would be we would have to state the minimum percentage to define whether an NPS enrolls a significant percentage of students from low-income families, the sources of poverty data to be used in determining counts of students from low-income families in an NPS, factors to determine whether NPS is most impacted by the COVID-19 emergency. And the information can be found on our EANS webpage, located at the link on this slide. Next slide, please. And so again, schools and/or organizations are required to submit an application to receive services or assistance through the ARP EANS program. Again, just because you applied for EANS 1, you must again apply for EANS 2 or ARP EANS. The application will be submitted via an online application, which will be available on December 13th, 2021, and posted to the CDE EANS webpage. And I will pass it back to Lindsay for this.
Thank you, Joe. All right, so let's walk through the eligibility requirements. There are some similarities between EANS 1 and a couple of differences for EANS 2. So the first is that for the purposes of ARP EANS program funds, federal law specifies that an eligible non-public school is an elementary or secondary school that is nonprofit, accredited, licensed, or otherwise operates in accordance with state law. Next slide, please. Was in existence prior to March 13th, 2020, which is the date the president declared the national emergency due to COVID-19, and that this school did not and will not apply for and receive a loan under the Small Business Administration's PPP that was made on or after December 27th of 2020. These 4 criteria are the same as EANS 1. Please go to the next slide. All right, the difference between EANS 1 and EANS 2 in eligibility requirements are on this slide. For ARP EANS or EANS 2, to be eligible for services and assistance, the non-public school must demonstrate that 20% of your total student enrollment are of students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged or from low-income families. The CDE will accept the following data sources regarding the number and percentage of low-income families enrolled in your school for the 1920 school year. The data sources, these 4 data sources are the same data sources we accepted for EANS 1, and they are available free or reduced price lunch data, scholarship or financial assistance data, E-rate data, or proportionality data. Again, all of these, any of these 4 data sets, they must be from the 1920 school year regarding enrollment, and all of these will be suitable to show the 20% threshold. This ARP EANS also requires sort of a secondary validation. It's like when you go into Amazon, you have to type in your password and then get a text message to log in. So the second criteria is that ED asks that states identify that we show who has been most impacted by COVID-19. And in California, we have decided that we will identify the impact of COVID-19 based on the number of COVID-19 infections per capita in the community or communities served by your school. So what we have decided to do is we are using the old blueprint tier colors, the red, purple, orange, yellow. We've already done the analysis, and based on our calculations and data analysis, every county in California meets the requirement of COVID-19 impact. So in other words, all of you who are on this call, you will be eligible for ARP EANS or EANS 2 funding as long as you can show the 20% threshold of low income students. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, I am going to now pass this over to our administrator of the Title I Policy Program and Support Office, Carrie Lopes, to walk you through the application timeline and process.
Thank you, Lindsay. So we're going to start first with the ARP EANS application timeline. Next slide, please. So the timeline is also available in the actual request for application. I believe it's the second page, but I'm going to walk through the timeline. First of all, we have posted as a reference copy only on the EANS webpage as of December 3rd, the request for application. And like I've noted, it is a reference copy only. You're not going to fill out the application. You're going to submit via an online application process. We are providing a technical assistance webinar today, which is an overview of the RFA and the program requirements. The application window for you, for all schools to apply, is December 13th through January 3rd of 2022. And this is done once again through the application process online. And that link will be available to all schools as of Monday, December 13th. So all applications have to be received by CDE by January 3rd of 2022, and there is not a grace period. So I think it's really important to note this, that once 5 p.m. hits on the survey, it will automatically close without any type of grace period. The application evaluation that CDE will be conducting will be between January 3rd through January 11th, and then CDE will notify all applicants regardless of the status. We will be notifying all applications about the status, the award amount, and the program requirements by January 12th of 2022. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides are about how to complete the ARP-EANS application. Once again, our webpage is on this slide as well, the access to it, and the online application will be accessible through this webpage. Next slide, please. So when you get into, before we get into the cover sheet, once you access the online application, the first thing you're going to see is an overview of what ARP-EANS is and the requirements. So it really is kind of identical to the reference copy that is currently on the web page. Once you get through some initial information, the overview, some requirements, some eligibility requirements additional to what we're talking about today, you will come upon what's called the cover sheet, or Part A. And here's where you'll need to put in some information. So I think it's really important that you look at the RFA first that's posted online, gather all the information that you think you're going to need before you try to access the link. So the first thing that's going to ask you is to provide some just initial information about the name of the school or the organization, your mailing address, an email address of the authorized representative of the school, your CDS code, if you have one. If you do not have a CDS code, then you will simply move through that portion of the application. And then the name of the authorized representative of the school, and then of course the phone number. Next slide, please. And then we will ask you for a primary contact, a name and email address and phone number of that primary contact. And this could be somebody outside of the principal or executive director of the school, somebody else that might be working on ARP-EANS with you, who might serve as the primary contact. So that's the first bit of information that's going to be asked during the application process. And then what's going to happen is you're going to be asked to submit a scanned PDF version of the cover sheet that's available on the EANS webpage. So you'll need to download the version. You'll need to sign the version of the scanned PDF and then upload it into the actual application. So the signature of the school must be either an original ink signature or an authenticated e-signature in order to upload the application. So you're going to fill in some information for the cover sheet, and then you're going to attach the PDF version. You're going to download that, fill it out, and reattach it to the application. Next slide, please. If you are an organization that has governing authority over a group of schools, you can submit an application on behalf of its member schools. And some of you are familiar with this from your experience with EANS 1. The RFA includes a chart in order to list all the schools submitted in the application, which will be uploaded as a PDF attachment. And this PDF attachment will be on the EANS webpage as well, along with the application link. So if you are a single school and you are not submitting for multiple schools as part of an organization, you're simply just going to be checking the box no on the application, and you're just going to move through. If you are an organization that is submitting on behalf of its member schools, you're going to check yes, and you're going to fill out the PDF version on the CDE webpage, and you're going to upload that to your application. Next slide, please. Through the application process, as many of you know, there are 12 services that are being offered or provided under ARP-EANS, and a school will apply for services or assistance in the RFA through the application process by checking all categories of need. So these are simply just listed in the application online, and you're just going to go through and check box off the ones that you think are areas that your school needs or categories of needs for services or assistance that you are requesting. Next slide, please. So here's the final list. Like I said, there are 12 total. A lot of these are very similar. Most of you are familiar with these if you're under EANS 1 with the services and assistance. And when you get into the application, I would read very carefully over each one of them. And the survey will allow you to check as many boxes as you want. So you can check 2 boxes, you can check up to 12 boxes, but it's really individualized and it really depends on the needs and the local context of your school. Next slide, please. So once you've completed that in the survey, it will ask you for some data requirements in terms of enrollment and low income data. So you'll be asked for total student enrollment of the school in the 2019-20 school year for grades TK through grade 12. You'll be asked what your grade levels serve for your total school, for your schools. So you may only serve grades TK through grade 3, or maybe you serve TK through grade 5. Whatever your grade levels are that you serve at your school, you're going to add that into the information. And then you're going to put the number or estimated number of students from low-income families enrolled in the school for the 19-20 school year. Next slide, please. After you complete that portion, then the survey is going to ask you to choose one of the following sources that you are using as a school in order to come up with that 20% of low income counts. So once again, you can use available free or reduced price lunch data. You can use scholarship or financial assistance data. You can use E-rate data, or you can use proportionality data, making sure that you have the documents supporting the sources and method of computation. The school, and this is a really important point too, the school is not required to submit the selected allowable data sources. So we're not asking schools to upload your data sources, but we are requiring that schools retain all records for a period of 5 years to verify compliance in the case of an audit review of the data. Next slide, please. So the next slide is about the funding methodology. That is, how is CDE going to calculate the funding for each of the schools once we receive all of the applications. Next slide, please. So as was stated earlier, there is a total of about $180 million in EANS fund available to California for allocation under ARP-EANS. So once we receive all of the applications, what we will be doing is we will be dispersing funding based on a pure per student base rate plus an additional supplemental rate for each student from a low income family. So the supplemental rate will be 20% of the base rate. So for example, if the base rate is $100 per student, then each student from a low income family would generate an additional $20, which would equate to the low income supplemental rate. Next slide, please. The CDE will calculate the base rate and the low income supplemental rate based on the sum of the total student enrollment and total number of students from low income families from all valid ARP-EANS applications received by the due date. So it's not possible for us right now to calculate or give schools right now what the base rate is or the low income rate until we have all of those valid ARP-EANS applications. And until we have received those, that's when we would go ahead and work through the funding methodology. Next slide, please. So the electronic application submission, here's just some general information about it. Remember that the 2-week application window is from December 13th through January 3rd of 2022. And the application submission requirements are as follows. So you're going to complete the RFA on the CDE Eanes webpage via the online application. There is a paper copy of the RFA right now on the Eanes webpage, and I encourage everybody to download that paper copy, review it thoroughly, and start gathering your information before you get onto the online survey. In addition to filling out the survey or the application online, you're going to submit as part of the online application, the PDF attachment for Part A, which is that cover sheet with all of your general information about your school. If you are an organization that is submitting on behalf of your member schools, then you're going to submit that PDF attachment with all the schools submitted in the application. Remember that a signature is required and that incomplete applications will be deemed ineligible. And the nice thing I just want to point out to you about the survey is that the survey will not allow you to advance unless you fill out everything. So if there's a chance that you miss something or you think that you skipped something, the survey does not allow you to advance. It will not allow you to move on to the next component. So it makes sure that you're completing everything in the application. Also, the survey will send a confirmation email once you complete the survey. Next slide, please. So we have some lessons learned from our electronic application process that we learned through Eanes 1 or under the Cursa Eanes. And I just wanted to point out some of the things that we have learned from our past experience in terms of schools submitting an electronic application to CDE. So when submitting your application, please keep the following in mind. The school name on the cover sheet, that is what we call Part A, must match the name of the school on its official documents. So this is really important that you go ahead and you're not using an abbreviation or a different version of the name of the school when you're submitting to CDE. So whatever name that you're using for the school on your official documents, make sure you're using that same name as you are applying for ARP Eanes. Read over the RFA carefully and have all documents available before accessing the online application. The confirmation email will come to you, but unfortunately it's not immediate and it may take up to about 24 hours to receive. So be patient if you don't receive the confirmation. I would say if you submit your online application, and I would say within 2 days, if you still have not gotten the confirmation between either of the emails that you're putting on the cover sheet, go ahead and reach out to me in the Eanes mailbox and I will help to see if I can't get that confirmation email for you, or just to make sure that everything is working properly on our end. A school may only submit an application once. Duplicative submissions are not allowable, so you can only submit one time with one application. The school is responsible for keeping all records and supporting documents as they pertain to the application. The only thing that you're going to submit to CDE is the online application, the PDF of the cover sheet with the signature from the administrator of the school or person representing the school. And of course, you're going to submit the PDF if you are an organization submitting on behalf of its member schools. If you have any questions about the process or accessing the online application, please submit your inquiry immediately to the Eanes mailbox and we can help troubleshoot for you. And the survey, once again, automatically closes on January 3rd, 2022, and there is not a grace period for submission. So be prepared. I would start early and not really, my advice is not to wait to the last minute. Next slide, please. All right, and then I'm going to turn it over once again to Lindsay, and she's going to talk a little bit about the solicitation of proposals.
Thank you, Carrie, for that very thorough overview, very detailed, and I just can't echo enough what Carrie shared as far as advising everyone to go on the CDE Eanes webpage, downloading the paper request for application, reviewing it over the next few days so that when the online application is posted on Monday, December 13th, you're up and running, ready to go. Please don't feel like you have to wait until December 13th to reach out to the CDE with any questions about the application or items. We are here to help and assist you through this process. So please just email us and we will get back to you as soon as possible. This next section actually really speaks to a lot of the questions that I was just reading in the Q&A and trying to answer while Carrie was presenting. What this is the ARP-EANS solicitation of proposals, or SOP. This is a requirement that is going to be for third-party vendors that are interested in providing the services and assistance to all of you, the non-public schools, using your EANS 2 allotments. So for those of you that are familiar with the EANS 1 program, you remember we had categories 1 and 2 that were eligible for the schools to go out, purchase, and invest in with your money. You'd front the money yourselves, and then the CDE, we would reimburse you based on the amount of your EANS allotment. And that's the process that we're completing right now. For EANS 2, there are no reimbursements. So schools do not have the option to go out, purchase, or invest in any services or assistance and then request a reimbursement. For EANS 2, all of the services and reimbursements will come directly from the state educational agency, or in this case for all us, the California Department of Education. So obviously what we are doing is the California Department of Education is looking for soliciting proposals from vendors who are going to work with the California Department of Education to provide all of those services, items, and assistance to all of the schools that will be eligible for EANS 2. So we just wanted to bring this up to everyone's attention because you will see eventually on our webpage, we'll probably have it posted in early January, this invitation for vendors to apply for the solicitation of proposals. We just want to make it very clear that this is for companies and organizations that will provide the services to all of you, the non-public schools. This solicitation of proposals is not for the non-public schools to apply for. The non-public schools, you are applying for funds through the online application portal, and the document that is relevant to all of you is the request for application, or the RFA, which is posted now. So we just wanted to share that. And as far as a timeline for when these, when the vendor will be selected, we are committed to being able to have the vendor or vendors that will be providing the services by March 1st of 2022. And then from there, those vendors will be reaching out. Schools who receive an EANS 2 allotment will go through those vendors to select the services and assistance and items that they want, and the vendors will be able to provide those directly to all the schools. We will be having more information and more details in future upcoming webinars once we get into the new year. But again, we just wanted to share that because this is a pretty big shift from EANS 1 to EANS 2. And with that, Amanda, if you could go to the next slide, please. So again, our contact information. Here's our our email address that we have mentioned multiple times. Please email this email address, and we will make sure that we respond to you. The EANS webpage also is listed here. And again, we will post the slides from this webinar to the EANS webpage next week. For a recording of this webinar, please email the EANS email address, and we will make arrangements to get the webinar recording to you and to your colleagues. All right, so we have some time here, and Joe is going to help Carrie and I by helping us with some questions. Again, Joe and I were kind of answering some of them, so everybody should be able to see the questions and the answered questions that were typed. In addition, if we do not answer every single question in the Q&A, which we will not be able to today, we are going to take all of the questions, synthesize them, respond to them in writing, and we will email that out by close of business on Monday to everybody who is registered for this webinar. All right, Joe, do you have any questions that you would like for us to answer live? Oops, Joe, you're on mute. We all had to do it at one point.
Yeah. And so one question to clarify, allocation will be decided by the same criteria as EANS 1. Is that correct? And yes, it will be. It will be based on base grant and then additional based on the amount of pupils from low-income families.
That's correct. The funding methodology will be the same for EANS 2 as it was for EANS 1, but the eligibility as to whether a school is eligible for EANS 2 is different in that you must demonstrate that 20% of your total student enrollment during the 1920 school year are socioeconomically disadvantaged.
Okay. And then some questions about, I think there's a little bit of confusion around proportionality. Can we explain that a little bit?
Yeah, and I was looking at some of those questions, and I think what we're going to do is we are going to, that will be one that we answer via writing with some specific guidance and some websites and help. And then if you still have questions after we do that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Okay. And then another question. So the non-public school has to be nonprofit, and that's correct.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. A lot of proportionality. So yes, we'll get those in writing. I think that would be the best way to respond to those. That way we can be clear.
Mhm. I see a question about special education non-public schools who contract with LEAs. Are there past funding opportunities? We are here to talk about the EANS program for EANS 2. Regarding the emergency assistance for non-public schools funds, EANS 1 is no longer eligible to apply for. And so looking ahead, you can apply for EANS 2. I encourage anyone who has specific question, reach out to your SELPA about potential previous funding opportunities.
I see a lot of questions about PPP, but we've answered quite a bit of those. So I would say make sure to check the answered section of the question and answer, but we will also send those out in writing.
Yes, we'll make sure that that's very clear too.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a good question. Where do we find a list of contractors and the services that they provide? So let me clarify again, is that, again, the way that the emergency assistance for non-public schools program works for EANS 2 is that the California Department of Education will hire a third party or third party vendors, and they will provide the services and assistance. EANS schools do not have the option to select your own provider and then tell the department who you're working with. You must go through the Department of Education. So please wait until the Department of Education announces who. First of all, you have to wait until you find out if you receive an EANS 2 allotment. And then from there, you need to wait until the Department of Education announces who the vendors are. Again, that timeline will be, we will announce the EANS 2 allotments by January 12th, 2022. And then we will announce who the vendors are to provide EANS 2 services to the schools no later than March 1st, 2022. And I understand there's a little bit of a month gap in there. So please reach out to the EANS email box if you have any questions or concerns, but that is the timeline for now.
Okay. And I know there's one question. Why do you have the application period primarily during the time frame when schools are closed for winter break? We understand the frustration on that. Unfortunately, our timeline is dictated by federal statute, so there's nothing we can do to change that. The 30-day requirements to post our RFA and the 30 days to approve or deny applications, unfortunately, is in federal statute, and we have to follow that by law.
There will be no, and Carrie mentioned earlier, there is not a grace period for the applications, and we cannot offer the grace period because we don't have that ability, as Joe just said, as per our federal guidelines.
I see another question here about funding methodology. It says, are we using our current enrollment or the 2019-20 school year? So the information that you're putting in the application where it talks about enrollment data in terms of the number of students, the grade level served, the low income counts, that's all coming from your 2019-20 enrollment data.
Perfect.
Okay. I see a question here about, please go over what funds can be used for. So if you go back into the application itself, there are 12 services and or assistance that can be used, and you'll be asked to check off those services or assistance that are most in need for your school through the application process.
Okay, and I'm still seeing a lot of questions on the PPP loans. And again, I said some of those are answered, but just to go over it, just so folks can hear, and we will respond to writing. An NPS is eligible if it did not and will not apply for and receive a loan under the Paycheck Protection Program that is made on or after December 27, 2020. So if you received a PPP loan guaranteed that was made before December 27, 2020, you are still eligible. But if it was after December 27, 2020, you are not. So again, we'll put that in writing, but I keep seeing that one. So just to answer.
Another question is, will we be notified about the SOP application process? Probably in that it will be information, and also asking you that if you do, we understand and acknowledge that many of you work with vendors through your Title I Equitable Services funds on a regular basis. And so for the SOP application process, we'll push out an announcement that it's been posted. Again, this is not for non-public schools to apply for, but you could share with your vendors that you work with and encourage them to apply. Okay, so as far as the questions specifically about vendors and how all of that will work, we will have a future webinar in January of 2022 for that, and we will invite all of the schools that receive an EANS 2 allocation. Again, you'll know by January 12th. We'll host a webinar after that to talk more details as far as next steps. One other question, does EANS 2 replace category 3 under EANS 1? Let's not think about it like that. EANS 1 and EANS 2 are two separate programs. The overarching purpose of EANS 1 and EANS 2 is the same, which is to provide services and supports for eligible non-public schools impacted by COVID-19 and your students. But I encourage you to look at the EANS 2 request for application, which is posted on our website, to see all of the services and assistance that are available for EANS 2. But please think about these two programs as two separate entities. There is no overlap between EANS 1 and EANS 2 as far as the CDE is concerned. Again, I just want to share that services will, so technically services will be provided by the Department of Education through the vendors that we hire and announce by March 1st of 2022. Again, the timeline for that, we'll be sharing more once we announce the EANS 2 awardees, and we will hold a webinar following your announcement of your award to talk about next steps and timeline. But we do need to wait until we have those vendors in place, and it will be no later than March 1st, 2022.
And a question about pulling the timeline slide. The timeline is actually on our RFA on the EANS website. So I know someone asked about that, and we've posted it in the answers, but in this response right here on CDE's EANS website, you can find the timeline posted on our RFA.
Again, here's a good question. If a school received funding via EANS 1 and used a vendor to support services needed, can they use the same vendor without going through another process? Not necessarily. So you must wait until the CDE announces who the approved vendors are for EANS 2 before you would plan to use any of your EANS 2 allotment. So the golden rule, if you pay out of pocket for like EANS 2, you are not getting reimbursed because there are no reimbursements. So don't pay out of pocket and then think there's going to be a reimbursement check. You must wait for EANS 2 for the vendors to be announced and to go directly through them. No cash will be exchanged between the CDE and schools for EANS 2. It will go directly to the vendor. As far as the questions about the PPP loans and different dates and things, what we can say is that I believe, and maybe we can go back to that slide. The requirement for eligibility is, I'm sorry, I'm going to pull it up here. Amanda, if you could go to slide, I think it's 13. So the requirement is that a school did not and will not apply for and receive a loan under the Small Business Administration's PPP that was made on or after December 27th, 2020. And so again, Joe, can you kind of add a little more to that? I think there's some questions of if we apply for the PPP and are forgiven after December 27th, 2020, are we still eligible? Or is this something that we need to answer in writing, which we can do?
I will take a look at it and I think we'll respond in writing.
Okay.
Just want to double check on that one.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions about that, so we'll get to the bottom of it for everybody. Okay, and then I think just maybe a few more questions. With the timeline set, this looks like the services provided would have to be used in the 22-23 school year. Is that correct? Is summer eligible as well? That is not correct. So for the for ARP EANS or EANS 2, remember, you are able to access those services through September 30th of 2024. So any services, you can use them all the way up till September 30th of 2024. So that does go in the 24-25 school year, but only for those couple months. Summer is eligible because it's not about school year, it's just about those times. And remember, for EANS 1, those funds, access to those funds sunset September 30th, 2023.
And then I saw a few questions regarding preschool children receiving services or assistance under the EANS program. So if preschool children are enrolled in an eligible non-public elementary school that receives service or assistance under the EANS program, preschool children and their teachers may receive allowable services.
Okay. Okay, to the school. Okay, yes. So, and I think the final question is a great question to kind of close out this webinar and just say, please reach out to us. Amanda, if you could put the contact slide up one more time at the very end. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to us. We are happy to get on a phone call and just talk through any of your questions. And a question to close us out is, whoops, sorry. Okay, the schools don't just receive the funds from EANS to the school, it goes to the service provider we purchase things from. So what that is again, yeah, correct. No cash will pass between the CDE and non-public schools for EANS 2. Everyone who applies for EANS 2 and has a 20% threshold of low income students and can demonstrate that and meets all the other criteria for non-public school, will receive an EANS allotment. That amount is kind of like in your bank. Once we announce who the vendors will be to provide the services and assistance directly to the schools, those vendors will keep track of how much each school has in your allotment or in your bank to use. And you'll cash in that allotment for the services and assistance directly through that vendor. And that is how EANS 2 will work. Okay, so we appreciate all of you jumping on. We appreciate your questions. Please reach out directly to us. We are here pretty much 24/7 now that we're all answering this, because we want to make sure that there's clarity. We know that this is an unprecedented program and a new one. And so we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And also, as you heard our Deputy Superintendent, Malia Vela, share earlier, this is a priority for our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, because he and all of us share the commitment to ensure that all of our students receive access to an equitable and high quality education. And also we are able to support all of your schools, all of your teachers and staff, because we acknowledge the incredible stress that COVID has put on all of you and all of us here. So please let us know if there's anything we can do to help. I want to thank my colleagues for joining me today on this webinar, and thank you to all of you for being here with us today. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.